Hello everyone, welcome. As Mary and Beth introduced, I'm Lauren Tierney. I'm a graphics reporter and cartographer at the Washington Post, and I'm really excited to be speaking to you guys today about how we use drones at the Washington Post for visual journalism projects, or dronalism, as my colleagues Tamiko and Lars Karklis helped me come up with last night, the title. Also very excited NACIS is in the Pacific Northwest this year. It's great to be coming close to home again for NACIS, so this is really great. So at the Post, we mainly use drones for two primary purposes. So one, for video footage, so BRoll, that kind of stuff, and then also for gathering imagery for 3D modeling, mapping, and AR purposes. A few years ago, there was really only about one person, I think, who had their drone pilot's license at the Post and was flying drones. Now there's about 10-ish on the video team, and then there's 3 licensed pilots on the graphics team who have their Part 107 FAA license to fly drones. And these are 2 example projects of things that have published in the last 2 years at the Post that have use these 2 primary methods. So on the left, Gone in Generation includes a lot of B-roll footage just showing how landscapes have been impacted by climate change. And then on the right, a project, Seen Loose, which included 3D models of buildings and stadiums and other structures in Puerto Rico that had been impacted by the hurricanes that happened there a couple years ago. And so these are 2 examples of when capturing drone footage goes really well and you're able to incorporate it into a story. But I'm going to go into an example of when drone dreams do not work out. And so this was a project that published last week that myself and my colleague Joe Fox worked on fall foliage across the U.S. Really fun project to work on. And on the left is Joe's awesome map of where you can most likely find certain colors, and his leaf illustrations, and also imagery provided by Tim Wallace and Krishna Kara from Descartes Labs. And if you checked out the project, you may have noticed there was no drone footage. And so essentially, I'll paint a picture. So Joe and I had these, we were thinking we wanted to design the top of the page on the online story to have this cool imagery of these, rolling hills and mountains with reds and golds and yellows. So we thought hey, I bet right before we publish this project in October, it'll be cool enough. There's gonna be these red and orange trees. So let's try it out. So 2 days before we were publishing our project, we drove out to West Virginia, and we drove, and we drove, and we thought we'd see something kind of like this. Kind of like what you see here. But instead, we saw this. So lots and lots of green and a teeny tiny patch of red, which honestly may have just been sick trees. So it's kind of a bummer if they were turning that little patch and the rest weren't. So we didn't use drone imagery, but we just had to get creative. So sometimes these drone dreams don't work out for projects and the way you think, and so you have to be ready to improvise. So while we were out there, we're walking down the road, just trying to find places to take off the drone, all that, and we saw, there were at least some red and gold leaves on the ground. So we got a grocery bag out of the car, we started picking up some leaves, and we brought them back and figured we could maybe do something with it. So we brought these leaves back, Joe scanned them in, cropped them, and then mosaiced them at the top of the page to create this really cool topper for the page. And honestly, I think this maybe turned out better than the drone imagery was, and it was just an example of if you're wanting to do stuff with drones, you have to be flexible. It's not always going to work out, and you may come up with something even better if things don't work out. But I'm going to go into detail about a project where drone stuff did work out that we worked on the graphics team. This story, What Remains of Bears Ears, published this April, and essentially what we did was we looked at areas that were once included within the original designation of the Bears Ears National Monument by the Obama administration, and now fall outside of the now reduced boundaries, the boundaries that were reduced in size by the Trump administration. And to cover this, we wanted to travel to southeastern Utah, capture footage of these unique places, and communicate their cultural and historic importance to a larger audience. So we worked out a pitch, we pitched it to our editors, and within a week, we were on our way. So here you've got Seth, who's on the left, you've got Joe Fox, who's on the right, and all of our luggage in tow. So we had one large drone, one small drone, we had batteries, we had a sat phone, we had emergency gear, we had Seth's AeroPress, because coffee's important when you've got late nights and early mornings. And we flew into Albuquerque, we drove 5 hours to southeastern Utah. On top of that, our flight out of DC was delayed 6 hours, so we only had 2 days in the field to capture all of the footage we wanted, and we had pitched this story like a week before, so it moved really quick. And so we were headed out. So since we only had 2 days, we had to move really quick. So to accelerate our research, we talked to an expert on the ground, Josh Ewing, and we met with him, and he was able to point out on a map places that we could go that fell inside the original boundaries and outside of the new boundaries. And we took our handy print map along, handy benchmark map, which if you're traveling out in the field, bring a print map. This is something I learned at the University of Oregon, and it's really great working with experts. They can write on it, they can draw on it, and tell you where to go. And so we met with Josh, we pinpointed locations, and then we filled up the Tahoe and we were ready to go. And you might be wondering why there's a photo of Lauren pumping gas in Utah. Well, this was maybe like the third time I'd ever pumped gas in my life ever, because hashtag Oregon problems. Yeah, I didn't pump gas there. So Joe actually had to teach me again how to pump gas. So this is a proud moment, so it's in the slides. So once we had our locations, we were out there. This is Seth and I flying the drone. We knew our restrictions, so we knew based on flight maps, based on talking to BLM and US Forest Service officials and others, we knew where we could and couldn't fly. We knew the rules just based off of being licensed pilots. And in our 2 full days, we just had to go. So the first day we went and got drone footage of a petroglyph wall that I'll highlight later in the story, and then a cliff dwelling along Combe Ridge that we didn't end up using in the project, but then we went out, and then at the end of the day we went out to Valley of the Gods before the sunset. So we were trying to use all the daylight we had to capture footage, and this is just a fun little photo of all of us out in the field, super pumped to be flying drones. The drone was on the ground at this point, so it wasn't like eyes off the drone while it's in the air. And so the next morning we were back at it. We went up to the Abajo Mountains and flew up there to capture a cliff dwelling. And then we returned back because we had to charge the drone batteries. Those don't last too long, so we had to leave time for that. And then we went out to Valley of the Gods again to get footage of one of the rock towers. And my backpack turned out to be a really handy backpack. I actually have it here with me to hold the drone. But Joe and Seth were carrying their weight, so they had all the batteries and the other drone and stuff. But we would attach it to the backpack when we had to hike into places. Sometimes like a few hundred feet, other times it was like a couple miles. So out in Valley of the Gods, we flew the drone out in the rock tower. This is Castle Butte out there. And we wanted to get enough footage to video footage to be able to create a 3D model of this tower once we got back to the office. So that involved capturing all 4 sides of the tower. But Mother Nature had other ideas in mind. So as you can tell from this photo, like visibility is pretty clear. The sound's on, like wind's not too bad. It's just like kind of an overcast day. So we were trying to get video scans of this tower, and we got 3 sides of it, and then right as we were about to get the 4th side, this giant snowstorm just rolls down the canyon. It was almost like split second. It was crazy. It was high wind, snow, everything, and so we couldn't fly anymore, so we had to lay on the drone. We hadn't captured all of our footage, and we had to hop in the car and just get out of there before all the snow piled up and stuff, because we were like miles down dirt roads. And so that was fun, getting to race the Tahoe down dirt roads. I've never been more grateful to have learned how to drive on dirt roads growing up in like the country of Oregon. And I think Seth and Joe were a little terrified, but also impressed with the driving skills, but I don't know. It was mixed reviews. And so here's us, another selfie. Seth is pumped. Joe and I are like, let's get out of here. So we hurried back to Blanding, and this was our last day, so we had to make a decision. Like, our flight was out at 1 p.m. the next day. It was, again, like a 5 or 6 hour drive back to Albuquerque. It was either we just drive there the next morning, or we get up super, super early, get to Valley of Gods before the sun rises, and then try to capture the footage. So we got up early and tried to get the shot. So it was cold, it was early, but it was absolutely gorgeous. We tried our hardest to get as much as we could. And unfortunately, the lighting and shadows were all off with the footage we'd captured the day before, so the sun angles were different, and this was something we discovered when we were back in the office, but we did get some like cool B-roll that we were able to use in the project. And really no regrets. You know, we had a couple days, we just had to keep going to get as much footage as we could. And, you know, sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't. And I think that applies to a lot of stuff when you're out in the field, whether academic or projects or research. So, so we did get some excellent unintended B-roll from our time with the tower. So this pass was actually just meant to get like a side of it for the 3D model, but it made for a really cool B-roll that we were able to use in the topper. And actually this footage is reversed, so we were actually like flying up, but we reversed it. So when, and I'll show this later, when you scroll down the page, it kind of, you're just like flowing down the rock tower. But yeah, so, and then of course you can see like the ominous snow clouds in the background that we had no idea were there. So back in the office, Seth, Joe, and our colleague Gabriel Flory here with the awesome mustache here at the whiteboard, we gathered to storyboard what we wanted to include with the footage we had and that we gathered in the field. So, so we gathered, we figured out what we could use, what we couldn't, what could be created in the 3D models, what would be B-roll, what would be maps, etc. And this was, we worked from the time we went out there to the time the project published, it was a couple months. So Joe and I spent weeks calling people to report on this story. So we called tribal leaders from the 5 tribes of the Bears Ears region, archaeologists, politicians, locals, to better understand the history, culture, and politics of this region for Joe's writing of the story, which he worked on with senior editor Ann Gerhardt to formulate the story and incorporate all of the voices of the people from Bears Ears region. So it involved many hours of interviewing people because we wanted to get it right, as with any story. We wanted to get the perspectives of everyone involved. So to bring these elements together, we worked with designer from the Post, Jake Crump, who we had a lot of different assets, and we knew what we wanted to build, but Jake really helped bring the piece together, coming up with this topper, coming up with a subtle background and these subtle design for more of the locator maps that sat more with the text versus like the big saturated images. And so we worked with him, and he also built the Apple News version as well, and helped us with that as well. So Jake helped bring all these elements together. Seth and Gabe worked away on the 3D models. So we had this cliff dwelling in the Abajo Mountains, and they took the images and videos collected from the drones and processed them using a program called Reality Capture, which is a commercial photogrammetry software. And once they created the models, they removed the vertices from the 3D models to reduce the file size, making them more optimal for web and AR that was included in the Apple News and iPhone versions of the piece. And essentially the AR versions for the iPhone is essentially if you had an iPhone, you could, when you were on the story online, on mobile or on Apple News, you could take this model and you could like set it on your table and you could pinch and zoom and kind of explore it, which was really cool. And so they used Three.js and Apple's AR Quick Look to display this and get everything to move and pan around. And then along with writing the story, Joe built this amazing, I'll call it a vertical map of the petroglyph wall that we gathered imagery of with the drone. So the challenge with the petroglyph wall was showing drawings that are only a few inches tall in context on a cliff that's hundreds of feet long. We flew the drone along the entire etched portion of the cliff, recording video in high detail with the 4K camera that was on the drone. So Joe then extracted all these frames from the videos and used this panorama stitching software with a lot of trial and error, he said, to join the still images into one huge panoramic image, which was about 30,000 pixels wide. To show that to the reader, Joe, what he did is he took these images on this vertical map and he georeferenced them. So he georeferenced the panorama and turned it into map tiles that he then displayed using an interactive Mapbox map. So essentially, this whole thing is powered, behind it is powered a Mapbox map, and so it's more of this vertical map of exploring the petroglyph wall. And it allows you to pan and zoom and click on areas of interest, or if you see petroglyph etchings that are of interest, to learn more about it. And this information came from archaeologists that we spoke with. And here's an image of Joe flying the drone by that same wall. So that same wall you just saw, like this is the size of it. It was absolutely massive. So just to give a better sense of the scale. And so the drone footage is cool and all that, but how do you give the reader the context of where they are, how these zoomed in places fit into the greater landscape that's of significant cultural and historic importance? And how do you tie it together in a story of like how these places are managed and how they've been managed and how they're the difference in management now, and maps can help with that. So to explain the concept of the changing boundaries over grand landscape, we wanted to create a map that sat at the same visual level as the drone footage we had taken, and the 3D model. So all of those were really saturated, really big pieces, and so we wanted to create a reference map that sat at that same level to show how the boundaries have changed in the reduction of size of the national monument. So we want to give it a very saturated look to match the other elements, and also to match the landscape that we experienced when we were out there in the field. So for the base map, I used Blender. Shout out to Nick Underwood, #CartoBlend, I think it is. This was my first time using it professionally, and to create a base map that had that feel of the desert that we experienced when we were out there. So I'm gonna say I actually have mixed feelings about Blender. It's a super powerful tool, and it has a lot of different capabilities, but one thing that I find is often terrains made in Blender have the tendency to have a similar feel or look to them. And again, it has a lot of powerful tools in it, but I often feel like if you see a map that's made in Blender, you can almost tell it's made in Blender if you've seen a variety of them. So that's my hot take. So my goal with using the software was I wanted to learn Blender, but I wanted to try to make a map in Blender that used the capabilities of Blender, but didn't make it immediately look like it was made in Blender. So to do this, I used Daniel Huffman's awesome tutorial. I won't go into the Blender making details, but please check out this tutorial. Daniel recently updated it, I think, to update it for the latest version of Blender, and it's awesome. Like, I walked through it and was able to go through and had enough information to be able to start experimenting myself, so highly recommend it. And these are all the different iterations of me just working in Blender to work with the different lightings, purple lighting, kind of like a tan glow, just to give that better feel of the canyons and desert. And so this is it incorporating overall, and that tan you saw at the beginning there, that was an idea from Jake and his fellow designer that we wanted the map to, it was a very big saturated map, but we wanted it to flow in and out, almost like it was rising out of the page. So they had that really cool idea to add that tan hill shade in there just to kind of combine it, let it flow in and out of the text really smoothly. So, and then I should also say Descartes Labs provided that cloud-free satellite imagery that was used in the map as well. So to leave off, I'll leave you with a few best practices for drone and field work that we found when we were out there. This isn't completely comprehensive, but these are some things that I think would be most applicable whether you're flying drones or just doing field reporting, academic research, or professionally. Leave no trace. When you're out in these areas, like, don't leave stuff behind. Don't be picking stuff up off the ground and taking it home. Just be really cautious of that. Remove geotagging from photos. If you go to these places, just be, if you're posting photos on social media, remove the geotagging. You don't want looters and other people to be going to these areas and disrupting these sites of cultural and historic importance. Also be cautious in reporting locations. So even if you remove geotagging, don't be putting lat lawns in places. Don't be putting miles from such and such. Be very general with where you're putting these places, which is what we did. We never pinpointed anything exactly on a locator map or anything because we didn't want people to go to these places and cause harm. Know where you should and shouldn't fly, so especially if you're a licensed pilot, you should know the rules. You should know the rules, and also talk to officials if you're unclear. Beware of losing GPS signal. Sometimes when you fly a drone in an overhanging area, it loses connection with the satellite, and just be cautious of that. Like, obviously nothing happened, but it's just something to be prepared for and to research. And then things will go wrong. So as I mentioned with the fall project and in some parts of the Bears Ear stuff, weather happens, trees don't change colors, like all kinds of stuff. And so it's really important in drones and in life to be creative and flexible. And if you can go out in the field, go. Like if your job or university or anything provides an opportunity to go out in the field and report or gather information, go. Like your maps and your projects are going to be so much better when you actually experience the landscape and also talk to people on the ground who are living there and know these places intimately. If you want to check out the project, which please do, Joe's writing of the project is absolutely incredible. This is the link where you can check it out. And also just a reminder, Tim Miko mentioned this in his presentation, but for NACIS members, we're giving a free 30-day membership for Washington Post articles, so you can check out this article or any other article you may be interested in. So be sure to take advantage of this. And I won't be taking questions now because I'm out of time, but please find me later at the conference, this evening, NACIS Night Out. I'll be around all day tomorrow, and thank you.